My parents told CPS I was delusional, then got caught running a fake therapy practice with a dead girl's mother and filming me through a vent. When I asked Mom why she lied to every doctor, she tilted her head and said, "Do you think anyone would believe a girl who thinks she's not sick?" I didn't say a word. That was 10 months ago. This morning, she looked at the courtroom sketch of me and threw up in her holding cell. When my overprotective parents caught me sneaking back into the house at 2 a.m., they locked me in the basement for months because they said I couldn't be trusted to make safe decisions anymore. My parents had been paranoid about my safety ever since my older brother died in a car accident 3 years ago. Growing up after his death, I watched them install security cameras, tracking apps, and motion sensors throughout our house. By age 12, I knew they checked my location every 10 minutes and knew they'd panic if I deviated from my routine. I practiced lying about dead phone batteries, created fake study group excuses, and had friends cover for me constantly. Every dinner included reminders about hammered drivers, kidnappings, and school shootings. Mom would check my pulse while I ate, monitoring my stress levels. Dad made me text photo proof of my location every hour. I lived in constant surveillance, knowing that one missed check-in would send them spiraling. When they caught me climbing through my bedroom window after sneaking out to meet Tyler, Mom grabbed my phone while Dad blocked the doorway. They'd been awake all night, tracking my phone's last location at the park before it died. They marched me to the basement and told me to sit while they figured out what to do. Hours later, Dad came down looking exhausted. "You'll stay down here where we know you're safe," he said. "You've proven you can't handle freedom, so you won't have any." They moved a bed downstairs and installed a lock on the door, bringing meals down 3 times a day. If they had to come downstairs, they'd lecture me about every teenager who died doing exactly what I'd done. Mom would show me news articles about missing kids, saying this was the only way to keep me alive. I had a bed, a small bathroom, and my school books. They said I could do online classes from down here. When I begged to go back to regular school, they showed me security footage of school shootings. Dad would sit outside the door reading statistics about teen mortality rates while I stared at the ceiling. Sometimes my little sister would ask why I couldn't come upstairs, but Mom would tell her I was sick and contagious. After 2 months, Dad announced they'd found a therapist who did house calls for agoraphobic teens. "She'll help you understand why we're doing this," he said. "Once you accept that the world is dangerous, maybe you can earn privileges back." He showed me the therapist's website, full of testimonials from parents who'd saved their children through isolation. "She starts next week," he said. I pretended to cooperate while loosening the screws on the tiny basement window. 3 months into my imprisonment, I heard my parents on a phone call upstairs about homeschooling paperwork. Mom was struggling to explain why I'd suddenly left public school. That's how I found out they'd been telling everyone I had severe anxiety and couldn't leave the house. That night, I finally got the window open enough to squeeze through. It was only about a foot high, just big enough for ventilation, but I'd lost weight from stress. I crawled out at 3 a.m. while my family slept, my body aching from contorting through the opening. I ran to my friend Emma's house. Her dad was a cop who'd always thought my parents were weird. When he saw me at his door in pajamas and socks, he let me in and called for backup while Emma's mom made me tea. The police went to my house with me to investigate, but Mom and Dad were ready. They showed officers my brother's death certificate, photos from his funeral, and printed emails from my school about my declining grades. "We're just trying to keep her alive," Mom sobbed. "She's been acting out since her brother died. We didn't know what else to do." The officers looked sympathetic until they searched the basement. They found something my parents hadn't hidden well enough: med bottles, dozens of them, all prescribed to me by different doctors, all filled in the last few months. Antipsychotics, sedatives, anxiety meds I'd never taken. Dad tried to explain they were just in case. I became violent, but the officers recognized the pattern. They'd been doctor shopping, getting multiple prescriptions to keep me sedated. When they ran the prescriptions through the system, they found something odd. Half the pills weren't even real. They were sugar pills, placebos my mom had been ordering online. She'd been switching out my food with sedatives some days, placebos others, documenting my mood swings to justify keeping me locked up. She had a whole journal tracking my reactions, planning to use it for disability claims. The therapist Dad mentioned wasn't a therapist at all. She was Mom's cousin Linda, who'd lost her teaching license for inappropriate conduct with students. They'd created a fake therapy practice together, complete with a website and forged credentials. The police found emails between them discussing how to bill insurance for my treatment while keeping me isolated. They'd done this before, to Linda's own daughter 5 years ago. That girl had run away and never come back. They'd collected disability and insurance payments on her for 3 years before stopping. The detective thinks she might have figured out their scam and threatened to expose them. Now they're searching Linda's property while I'm staying with Emma's family. The way they used his brother's death to justify literal imprisonment, and then finding out they were doctor shopping and planning to sedate him with a fake therapist who was actually the mom's cousin, that's absolutely terrifying. And discovering they'd done this before to Linda's daughter who ran away and never came back, my heart is racing just thinking about what could have happened if OP hadn't escaped through that tiny window. The detective handling my case, Detective Catherine Chen, visited Emma's house the next morning with updates. She sat across from me in the living room while Emma's parents made breakfast in the kitchen. Her expression was serious as she pulled out her notepad. She explained that they'd found more evidence at Linda's property overnight. There were documents dating back years, showing a pattern of insurance fraud involving multiple family members. My heart raced as she described finding prescription records and disability paperwork for Linda's daughter, who'd supposedly been too mentally ill to function before disappearing. I watched her flip through pages of notes, each one revealing another piece of my parents' deception. The detective mentioned finding similar paperwork being prepared for me, with diagnosis codes for conditions I didn't have. My hands shook as I realized how close I'd come to becoming another missing person in their scheme. Emma's mom brought me toast and orange juice, but I couldn't eat. The detective continued explaining how my parents had been building a case for months, documenting fake symptoms and getting multiple doctors to prescribe medications based on their lies. She showed me photocopies of my mom's journal entries, describing behaviors I'd never exhibited. The entries were detailed and disturbing. Mom had written about me having violent outbursts that never happened, hallucinations I'd never experienced, and sewer slide attempts I'd never made. Each entry was dated and included specific times, creating a false medical history that would justify keeping me locked away indefinitely. Detective Chen asked me questions about the medications I'd been given. I tried to remember which meals had made me drowsy, which days I'd felt unusually anxious or paranoid. She took notes as I described the pattern of good days and bad days, how my parents would act concerned when I felt sick after eating, pretending they didn't know why. Emma came to sit beside me, holding my hand as I recounted the months in the basement. Her dad, Officer Rodriguez, joined us in the living room. He'd been part of the initial response team and looked angry as he listened to the detective's findings. He mentioned how convincing my parents had seemed, how they'd almost fooled everyone with their grief-stricken act. The detective revealed that they'd tracked down 3 other families who'd been in contact with Linda's fake therapy practice. 2 had pulled out after sensing something was wrong, but 1 family had paid thousands for treatment before realizing the credentials were forged. That family's daughter was now in actual therapy, dealing with the trauma of being convinced she was mentally ill when she wasn't. I learned that my parents had been planning this for over a year, starting shortly after I turned 15. They'd begun with small things like scheduling unnecessary doctor appointments, telling physicians I was showing signs of anxiety and depression. Each doctor only saw a piece of the puzzle, prescribing medications based on my parents' false reports. The detective showed me printouts from the fake therapy website. It was sophisticated, with stock photos of a professional office and testimonials from fictional parents. Linda had even created fake social media profiles for her therapy practice, posting motivational quotes and mental health tips to seem legitimate. The level of planning made me feel sick. Officer Rodriguez mentioned that they'd found recording equipment in my basement room. My parents had been filming me without my knowledge, probably planning to edit the footage to support their claims of mental illness. The cameras were hidden in air vents and behind picture frames, positioned to capture every angle of the room. I thought about all the times I'd cried in that basement, all the moments of despair and anger. They'd recorded everything, waiting to use my natural reactions to imprisonment as evidence of instability. The violation of privacy made me feel exposed and vulnerable even in the safety of Emma's house. Detective Chen explained that they were building a strong case, but warned me it would take time. My parents had hired lawyers and were claiming they'd acted out of love and concern for my safety. They were painting themselves as grieving parents who'd made mistakes while trying to protect their remaining child. The mention of my brother made my chest tight. They'd used his death as a weapon, turning their grief into justification for abuse. I wondered if he would have recognized the people our parents had become, if he would have stood up to them or fallen for their manipulation too. Emma's mom suggested I eat something, but food still seemed impossible. The detective continued sharing information about Linda's daughter, showing me a missing person report from 5 years ago. The girl had been 17 when she vanished, just 2 years older than I was now. Her photo showed someone who looked tired and defeated, probably taken during her own imprisonment. I studied the photo, seeing my own future if I hadn't escaped. The detective mentioned they were excavating parts of Linda's property based on cadaver dog alerts. The words made Emma squeeze my hand tighter. We both understood what they might find, though neither of us wanted to say it out loud. The detective asked about my little sister, whether I thought she was in danger. I explained how my parents had kept her away from me, telling her I was contagious. She was only 10, still young enough to believe their lies. The thought of her alone with them made me anxious, but Detective Chen assured me Child Services was monitoring the situation. Officer Rodriguez stepped out to take a phone call, returning with news that my parents had been formally charged with false imprisonment, fraud, and child endangerment. The judge had denied bail due to the severity of the crimes and the potential danger to my sister. Relief washed over me knowing they couldn't come after me, at least not immediately. The detective prepared to leave, promising to keep me updated on the investigation. She gave me her card and told me to call if I remembered anything else. As she stood to go, she mentioned that my case was helping them connect dots in other missing person cases, particularly those involving family members who'd supposedly run away or been institutionalized. After she left, Emma's family surrounded me with support. Her younger brothers, Nick and Cole, tried to cheer me up with video games while her parents discussed temporary guardianship paperwork. They'd already spoken to lawyers about keeping me safe until the legal situation was resolved. That afternoon, Emma helped me make a list of things I'd need from my house: clothes, school supplies, personal items that held meaning. Officer Rodriguez said he'd accompany me to collect them once the house was no longer an active crime scene. The thought of going back there made me nervous, but I knew I'd need my belongings eventually. Emma's mom, Catherine, worked from home as a therapist, a real one with proper credentials. She offered to help me process what I'd been through when I felt ready. Unlike Linda's fake practice, Catherine's office was warm and welcoming, filled with plants and comfortable chairs instead of hidden cameras and false promises. I spent the rest of the day trying to feel normal, but everything felt strange. Simple freedoms like walking to the kitchen or looking out windows without bars seemed surreal. Emma stayed close, understanding that I needed company, but not constant conversation. Her presence was comforting without being overwhelming. That evening, Catherine made my favorite dinner from before everything happened. She'd called my aunt to get the recipe, wanting to give me something familiar and comforting. The gesture made me cry for the first time since escaping. The tears came suddenly, months of suppressed emotion finally finding release. Emma's family didn't try to stop my tears or tell me everything would be okay. They simply sat with me, offering tissues and quiet support. Officer Rodriguez mentioned that crying was normal after trauma, that it was actually a healthy response. His professional insight mixed with fatherly concern helped me feel less broken. As bedtime approached, the reality of sleeping somewhere new hit me. Emma offered to share her room, setting up an air mattress beside her bed. The open door and easy access to the bathroom felt like luxury after months of locked doors and scheduled bathroom breaks. I lay awake listening to the normal sounds of a house settling, so different from the silence of the basement. Emma talked quietly in the darkness, sharing stories from school and updates about friends. She carefully avoided mentioning Tyler, the boy I'd snuck out to see that night everything went wrong. I appreciated her sensitivity, but also wondered what had happened in the months I'd been gone. So much life had continued without me. The next few days blurred together as the investigation intensified. More evidence emerged, including financial records showing large insurance payouts my parents had collected by claiming I had various mental illnesses. They'd been living off fraud for years, using their children's supposed conditions to avoid working real jobs. Detective Chen called with updates about Linda's property. They'd found remains buried in the backyard, confirming our worst fears about what happened to her daughter. The news hit hard, making my escape feel even more miraculous. I could have been next, another casualty of their greed disguised as concern. I stared at Detective Chen's phone screen showing the excavation photos from Linda's backyard. The disturbed earth and evidence markers made my stomach turn. I pushed away the breakfast plate Catherine had prepared, unable to process food while imagining what Linda's daughter had endured. Emma's family gathered around their kitchen table as Detective Chen explained the next steps. The investigation would continue, but my immediate safety remained the priority. Child Services had placed my little sister with our aunt temporarily while they assessed the situation. I felt relief knowing she was away from our parents, though guilt gnawed at me for leaving her behind during my escape. Officer Rodriguez arranged for me to retrieve belongings from my house that afternoon. The crime scene team had finished processing the basement, though yellow tape still marked certain areas. Emma insisted on accompanying me, and her parents agreed after some discussion about safety protocols. The drive to my former home felt surreal. Houses I'd known since childhood looked different now, as if my months of imprisonment had altered my perception of the entire neighborhood. Officer Rodriguez parked in the driveway where my parents' cars once sat, now impounded as evidence. Walking through the front door triggered memories of that night they'd caught me. The living room looked exactly the same, yet everything felt wrong. Family photos still lined the mantel, my brother's graduation picture prominently displayed. I wondered how my parents could use his memory to justify their actions while keeping his image so lovingly preserved. Emma stayed close as we climbed the stairs to my bedroom. Nothing had been touched since that night. My window remained slightly open from my failed escape attempt, curtains moving in the breeze. I grabbed a duffel bag and started packing essentials while Emma helped fold clothes. In my closet, I found the journal I'd hidden months ago. Inside were notes about my parents' increasing paranoia, documentation I'd started keeping without realizing its future importance. I handed it to Officer Rodriguez, who bagged it as potential evidence. My desk drawer contained birthday cards from friends, movie ticket stubs with Tyler, and other remnants of my life before the basement. Each item felt like an artifact from someone else's existence. I packed what mattered most, leaving behind anything that might trigger difficult memories. Officer Rodriguez suggested checking the basement for any personal items. My body tensed at the suggestion, but I knew facing that space might help with healing. Emma gripped my hand as we descended the familiar stairs. The basement looked smaller in daylight with the door wide open. Evidence markers dotted the floor where med bottles had been found. My makeshift bed remained in the corner, sheets still rumpled from my last night there. The tiny window I'd escaped through seemed impossibly small now. I retrieved a few books and noticed something behind the water heater. Reaching back, I pulled out a small box I'd hidden early in my imprisonment. Inside were photos of friends, notes they'd slipped me before everything changed, and a bracelet Tyler had given me. Officer Rodriguez examined each item before letting me keep them. Back at Emma's house, I spread my belongings across the guest room they'd prepared for me. Each item represented a piece of my identity I needed to reclaim. Catherine knocked gently, asking if I needed help organizing. Her professional training showed in how she respected my space while offering support. That evening, Detective Chen called with significant news. They'd matched dental records from Linda's backyard to her missing daughter. The confirmation hit hard, transforming suspicion into horrible reality. Linda had been arrested at her apartment, where they'd found more evidence of the insurance fraud scheme. I sat on Emma's back porch, processing this information. Her brothers played basketball in the driveway, their normal childhood activity a stark contrast to what I'd experienced. Catherine brought me hot chocolate, sitting quietly beside me without forcing conversation. Sleep came difficultly that night. Every creak of the house made me alert, checking the unlocked door to confirm my freedom. Emma had given me a nightlight, understanding my need to see the exit clearly. I dozed fitfully, waking often to reassure myself I wasn't back in the basement. Morning brought a call from my aunt. She wanted to discuss my sister's situation and my own living arrangements. The conversation was awkward but necessary. My aunt admitted she'd noticed my parents' behavior becoming extreme, but hadn't known how to intervene. She promised to protect my sister while supporting whatever decisions I made about my future. Detective Chen visited again, this time with a victim advocate named Sarah. They explained the legal process ahead, how my testimony would be crucial for prosecution. The thought of facing my parents in court made me anxious, but Sarah assured me there were ways to provide testimony without direct confrontation. Emma and I spent the afternoon at a local park, attempting normalcy. Fresh air and sunlight felt therapeutic after months underground. We didn't talk much, just walked and existed in shared space. Other teenagers passed by, living their regular lives, unaware of what I'd survived. Catherine suggested I might benefit from proper therapy when I felt ready. She recommended colleagues who specialized in trauma recovery, making it clear there was no pressure or timeline. The difference between her genuine care and Linda's fake therapy felt profound. Officer Rodriguez stopped by with updates on the investigation. They'd uncovered financial records showing my parents had collected over $40,000 through fraudulent disability claims. The money trail led to multiple bank accounts and false documentation spanning years. I thought about all the times my parents had claimed financial stress, making me feel guilty for needing school supplies or wanting new clothes. They'd been collecting money by pretending I was sick while keeping me prisoner. The betrayal felt layered, each revelation adding new dimensions to their deception. Emma's family included me in their regular routines, making space without making me feel like a burden. Dinner conversations stayed light, focusing on school events and weekend plans. Nick and Cole treated me like an older sister, their easy acceptance helping me feel less like a victim. Detective Chen called with news that Linda had started cooperating with investigators. She'd revealed details about the scheme's origins, how my parents had approached her after learning about her daughter's disappearance. They'd seen an opportunity to replicate the fraud, using me as their next victim. The information made me physically ill. My parents hadn't just reacted to grief, they'd actively planned my imprisonment for profit. Every concerned look, every protective measure had been calculated for financial gain. I wondered if they'd ever actually loved me, or if I'd always been just another resource to exploit. Sarah, the victim advocate, returned to discuss safety planning. Even with my parents in custody, she wanted to ensure I felt secure. We created strategies for different scenarios, including what to do if extended family members tried to contact me, or if I encountered people who believed believed my parents' version of events. My aunt brought my sister for a supervised visit. Seeing her made my heart ache. She looked confused and scared, asking why she couldn't go home. I explained in simple terms that mom and dad had made some bad choices and needed time to think about their actions. She clung to me, and I promised we'd stay in touch. The visit was emotionally draining. My sister didn't understand why I'd been sick or why I looked different now. I'd lost weight and muscle tone during imprisonment, my skin pale from lack of sunlight. Catherine helped facilitate the conversation, ensuring my sister felt heard while protecting her from traumatic details. After my sister left, I retreated to my room, overwhelmed by responsibility. I wanted to protect her, but could barely protect myself. Emma found me there, offering silent companionship that didn't demand emotional energy I didn't have. Detective Chen revealed they'd discovered more victims of Linda's fake therapy practice. 3 other families had paid for services, though none had progressed to imprisonment. Each case added evidence to the pattern of fraud, strengthening the prosecution's position. I started documenting my own memories more thoroughly. Sarah had suggested writing might help process trauma while preserving important details for legal proceedings. The exercise felt different from journaling. This was bearing witness to my own experience. Catherine offered her home office as a quiet space for writing. Surrounded by legitimate therapy credentials and ethical guidelines posted on her wall, I felt the stark contrast to Linda's deception. Real help existed. I'd just been prevented from accessing it. Officer Rodriguez brought news that my parents' assets had been frozen pending investigation. The house would likely be sold to pay restitution to victims. The thought of losing my childhood home hurt, even though I could never live there again. Emma reminded me that home meant safety, something that house had stopped providing long ago. I attended my first real therapy session with one of Catherine's recommended colleagues. Dr. Martinez specialized in trauma resulting from family abuse. She didn't push for details, instead focusing on coping strategies and grounding techniques. The session felt like a small step toward reclaiming agency over my own healing. Emma's school had agreed to let me complete coursework from their home while legal matters resolved. My old school had been told I was too anxious to attend, another lie my parents had spread. The administration worked with Emma's to create a transition plan that wouldn't overwhelm me. Studying felt strange after months of isolation. My parents had provided textbooks in the basement, but no real structure or support. Now, sitting at a proper desk with actual assignments, I struggled to concentrate. Emma helped me create a routine that balanced academics with recovery. Detective Chen called with news that made my blood run cold. They'd found evidence suggesting my parents had been considering moving states before I escaped. Paperwork showed they'd researched areas with less stringent homeschooling oversight, planning to relocate once they'd established my severe mental illness more thoroughly. The revelation that my imprisonment could have become permanent, that I might have disappeared like Linda's daughter, left me shaking. Emma's family surrounded me with support, but the narrow margin of my escape felt overwhelming. One more month, maybe 2, and I might have vanished entirely. Sarah helped me process this information, reminding me that I had escaped, that their plans had failed because of my courage and resourcefulness. She pointed out how my documentation and hidden journal had become crucial evidence. Even while trapped, I'd been fighting back in ways I hadn't fully recognized. My aunt filed for temporary custody of both my sister and me. The legal process would take time, but she wanted to ensure we stayed together and safe. I felt grateful for her stepping up, though adjusting to new family dynamics would be challenging. Detective Chen visited with final updates before the case moved to prosecution. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial fraud, false imprisonment, child endangerment, and conspiracy charges for both my parents and Linda. She expressed confidence in the case's strength while preparing me for the long legal journey ahead. I spent time with Emma's family, trying to envision a future beyond survival. College felt impossibly distant, but Catherine reminded me that healing wasn't linear. Some days would be harder than others, but progress was possible. Her professional insight balanced with personal warmth gave me hope. Officer Rodriguez arranged for me to meet other survivors of family abuse through a support group. Hearing their stories, seeing their resilience, helped me feel less alone. One woman shared how she'd rebuilt her life after escaping similar circumstances. Her success didn't erase her trauma, but proved survival could transform into thriving. Finding out they were planning to move states to areas with less oversight, and that they'd been recording everything to use as evidence of mental illness. The calculated cruelty is mind-blowing. The fact that OP's escape saved not just themselves, but also their little sister, and exposed this whole sick scheme that had been going on for years, makes this even more intense. The group meeting was emotionally intense but validating. Others understood the complexity of loving parents who'd harmed you, the guilt of escape, the fear of being disbelieved. We shared strategies for managing triggers and celebrating small victories in recovery. Emma remained my constant through these transitions. She didn't try to fix everything or pretend to fully understand. Instead, she offered consistent presence and normalized friendship. We watched movies, attempted baking, and slowly rebuilt the teenage experiences I'd missed. Detective Chen called with one final piece of information. Linda had revealed the location of documents related to her daughter's case. While the details remained confidential, she assured me this evidence would ensure justice for multiple victims. The investigation had grown beyond my case, uncovering years of exploitation. I thought about Linda's daughter often, wondering who she'd been before her mother's greed consumed her life. Her sacrifice hadn't been willing, but her story might prevent others from suffering similarly. I promised myself to honor her memory by rebuilding my own life. Catherine helped me establish routines that promoted stability. Morning walks, regular meals, and structured activities provided framework while allowing flexibility for difficult days. The balance between structure and freedom felt revolutionary after months of total control. My sister visited again, this time for longer. We played games and watched cartoons, carefully avoiding topics about our parents. She mentioned missing mom's bedtime stories, and I offered to read to her instead. Creating new traditions felt like planting seeds for a different kind of family. Dr. Martinez introduced EMDR therapy to help process trauma. The technique felt strange initially, but I noticed improvements in managing flashbacks. Certain triggers remained powerful, but I developed tools for grounding myself in the present, rather than reliving imprisonment. Emma's school approved my enrollment for the following semester. The thought of attending classes with other students felt daunting, but necessary. necessary. I couldn't hide forever, and education offered a path toward independence my parents had tried to steal. Officer Rodriguez checked in regularly, even after his official involvement ended. His paternal concern touched me, especially when he mentioned his own daughters were close to my age. He'd seen too many cases end badly, and felt relief that mine hadn't joined those statistics. I started volunteering at the local library, shelving books and helping with children's programs. The routine task felt therapeutic, and being around books reminded me of escape through reading during imprisonment. The librarians didn't know my story, but welcomed my help warmly. Sarah coordinated with prosecutors to prepare my testimony. We practiced in safe environments, building confidence for eventual court appearances. She emphasized that my truth was powerful, that speaking it would help ensure my parents couldn't hurt anyone else. The approaching legal proceedings felt overwhelming, but my support network had grown strong. Emma's family, my aunt, Detective Chen, Sarah, Dr. Martinez, and even Officer Rodriguez formed a protective circle. I wasn't facing this alone anymore. Catherine suggested I consider writing about my experience when I felt ready, not for publicity, but for personal processing and potentially helping other survivors recognize warning signs. The idea felt premature, but planted seeds for future consideration. My aunt's custody petition progressed smoothly. My parents' attorneys hadn't contested it, possibly recognizing the futility given criminal charges. Soon, my sister and I would officially be under her care, starting fresh in a home without surveillance or manipulation. I marked small victories, sleeping through the night, eating full meals, laughing genuinely at Emma's jokes. Recovery wasn't linear, but these moments accumulated into progress. Each day of freedom added distance from the basement, though memories remained close. Detective Chen made a final visit before the case transferred fully to prosecution. She expressed pride in my courage and resilience, noting how my escape had exposed a larger pattern of abuse. My story would help protect others, even if that hadn't been my intention when crawling through that tiny window. As weeks passed, the acute trauma softened into manageable pain. Triggers still existed, but I developed strategies for managing them. The basement had taken months from my life, but it hadn't stolen my future. My parents had tried to imprison more than my body. They'd attempted to cage my spirit. They'd failed. Emma and I made plans for the upcoming school year. Simple things like choosing classes and buying supplies felt monumental. Each decision represented autonomy my parents had tried to eliminate. I selected courses thoughtfully, imagining a future where education led to independence and purpose. The investigation's ripple effects continued. Other families who'd encountered Linda's fake therapy began sharing their experiences. Some had lost money, others had nearly lost children to manufactured mental illness claims. Each story strengthened the case while revealing the scheme's insidious reach. I thought often about the moment I'd decided to escape. Something had shifted that night, transforming fear into determination. The window had seemed impossibly small, but the alternative was accepting a slow disappearance. That choice, that desperate crawl toward freedom, had saved my life in ways I was still discovering. I woke to the sound of my sister crying in the guest room next door. My aunt was trying to comfort her, but the nightmares had been getting worse. I slipped out of bed and found them huddled together, my sister clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd brought from home. My aunt gestured for me to join them. I sat on the edge of the bed while my sister buried her face in my shoulder. She'd been having the same dream about Mom coming to take her away. The fear in her small body reminded me of my own nights in the basement, wondering if mourning would bring worse restrictions. Emma's family had offered to let us stay longer, but my aunt had found a rental house across town. The move was scheduled for next week. I helped my sister back to sleep, then returned to my room to pack more boxes. Each item I folded represented another step away from my parents' control. Morning brought an unexpected development. My aunt received a letter from my parents' attorney requesting supervised visitation with my sister. The legal language made my stomach churn. Even from jail, they were trying to maintain their grip on us. My aunt crumpled the letter and made a phone call to her own lawyer. I found my sister in the kitchen, pushing cereal around her bowl. She'd overheard the phone conversation and understood enough to be scared. I sat beside her and helped her finish breakfast, then suggested we spend the day at the park. Physical activity might help both of us process the anxiety. At the playground, I pushed her on the swings while watching other families interact normally. A mother nearby checked her phone constantly, reminding me of my own parents' surveillance. The difference was that this woman smiled when her daughter ran to show her a butterfly. There was no calculating look, no documentation of potential dangers. My sister asked if we could get ice cream. The simple request felt monumental. For months, every food choice had been controlled, every meal potentially drugged. I bought us both cones and watched her face light up at the freedom to choose her own flavor. These small victories mattered more than she could understand. That afternoon, Detective Chen called my aunt with troubling news. My parents had been corresponding with other inmates about legal strategies. They'd found someone willing to testify that I'd shown signs of mental illness before the imprisonment. The witness was another parent who'd lost custody of their child and blamed the system rather than their own actions. My aunt drove us to meet with her lawyer. I sat in the waiting room with my sister, helping her with a coloring book while adults discussed our future behind closed doors. The crayons in her small hands reminded me of the art supplies my parents had denied me in the basement, claiming they could be used for self-harm. The lawyer emerged with a strategic plan. We would need character witnesses and documentation of my parents' abuse. Emma's family had already agreed to testify about finding me at their door that night. Officer Rodriguez would provide professional testimony about the evidence found. The truth would speak louder than manufactured lies. Back at Emma's house, I helped prepare dinner while processing the day's developments. Catherine worked quietly at the kitchen table, reviewing notes for her own testimony. She'd been documenting my recovery process, the normal therapeutic progress that contradicted my parents' claims of severe mental illness. My sister struggled with homework that evening. She'd fallen behind during the chaos of our family's destruction. I sat with her at the dining table, patiently working through math problems. Teaching her felt healing, like reclaiming the big sister role my parents had stolen when they locked me away. Emma joined us after her basketball practice. She'd been selected for the varsity team, news that filled me with genuine joy. Life was continuing around us, proof that existence extended beyond trauma. We celebrated with homemade cookies, my sister's laughter filling the kitchen as she decorated them with too much frosting. That night, I discovered my old diary in a box of belongings from my room. Reading entries from before the imprisonment felt like meeting a stranger. sister. That girl had worried about tests and crushes, normal teenage concerns. I closed the diary and placed it with items for our new home, evidence of who I'd been before everything changed. My aunt woke me early the next morning. My parents had filed an emergency motion claiming my sister was being kept from necessary mental health treatment. The audacity of their continued manipulation made my hands shake. They were using the same playbook, even from behind bars. We drove to the courthouse for an emergency hearing. I wasn't allowed in the courtroom, so I waited outside with Emma's mom. My sister had to speak with a court-appointed advocate, explaining her experiences in age-appropriate terms. The wait felt endless, each minute stretching like hours in the basement had. The hearing ended with the judge denying my parents' motion. Their history of fraud had destroyed their credibility. My aunt emerged looking exhausted but relieved. My sister ran to me and I held her tight. We were staying together, at least for now. Moving day arrived with unexpected emotions. Loading boxes into the rental truck felt like closing a chapter. Emma helped carry my belongings, her presence a reminder that some connections had survived the chaos. My sister insisted on packing her own toys, asserting independence in small but meaningful ways. The new house smelled like fresh paint and possibility. My aunt had chosen it partly for the security features, understanding our need to feel safe. But these locks were for our protection, not our imprisonment. My sister ran through the empty rooms, claiming the one with the tree view as her own. Unpacking revealed items I'd forgotten existed. Photos from school events, awards from before the imprisonment, proof of a normal life that had been interrupted. I arranged them carefully in my new room, building a bridge between past and present. My sister helped hang string lights, her excitement infectious. That evening, we ate pizza on the living room floor, surrounded by boxes. My aunt had bought a small cake to celebrate our new beginning. As my sister blew out the candles, I realized this was our first family celebration without surveillance or manipulation. The freedom felt both foreign and precious. School enrollment required documentation my parents had hidden. My aunt spent hours on the phone, tracking down transcripts and medical records. Each bureaucratic obstacle felt like another echo of my parents' control. But she persisted, determined to restore normalcy to our lives. I accompanied my sister to her new school for orientation. Walking those hallways triggered memories of my own lost months of education. But watching her meet potential friends reminded me that her story could be different. The principal assured us that the school counselor was aware of our situation and available for support. Dr. Martinez scheduled sessions at her office near our new home. The first visit to her actual practice felt different from our meetings at Emma's house. Professional boundaries were important for healing, she explained. The office felt safe, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs that didn't hide recording equipment. My sister started having fewer nightmares. The stability of routine helped both of us. Morning walks to her school, afternoon homework sessions, evening games, or movies. Each predictable day built upon the last, creating security through consistency rather than surveillance. Emma visited on weekends, sometimes bringing homework so we could study together. Her presence connected me to the life I was rebuilding. We worked on college applications, though the future still felt abstract. She helped me see possibilities beyond mere survival. One afternoon, my sister found Mom's old cookbook while unpacking. She asked if we could make the chocolate chip cookies Mom used to bake. The request hit unexpectedly hard. Those cookies had sometimes contained sedatives, but my sister didn't know that. I suggested we find a new recipe instead, creating our own traditions. My aunt received another legal notice. My parents were appealing their bail denial. Their attorney argued that keeping them detained violated their rights, conveniently ignoring the rights they'd violated by imprisoning me. The legal system moved slowly, each motion extending our wait for real closure. I started tutoring at the local library, helping younger students with homework. The volunteer coordinator didn't know my history, treating me like any other teenager giving back to the community. The normalcy felt revolutionary. My sister sometimes joined me, reading quietly while I worked with students. Detective Chen called with updates on the investigation. More families had come forward about Linda's fake therapy practice. The pattern of exploitation ran deeper than initially discovered. Each new victim strengthened the case, though I felt sick thinking about how many lives had been damaged by their greed. My sister's teacher requested a conference. She'd been acting out in class, testing boundaries in ways that concerned the staff. My aunt and I attended together, listening to descriptions of defiant behavior. It made sense that she'd struggle with authority after what our parents had done. We developed a behavior plan focused on rebuilding trust. Catherine offered to see my sister professionally, but we decided against it. Too many connections to the trauma could hinder healing. Instead, we found her a therapist who specialized in children processing family disruption. The first session was hard, my sister initially refusing to speak, but gradually, she began opening up. I received mail forwarded from my old address. Most was junk, but one envelope contained a letter from Tyler. He'd heard about everything through Emma and wanted me to know he'd been thinking about me. His words were careful, respectful of the distance time had created. I tucked the letter away, not ready to revisit that connection. My aunt enrolled in a support group for guardians of traumatized children. She'd been struggling more than she showed, suddenly responsible for 2 teenagers recovering from parental abuse. Her commitment to learning how to help us revealed strength I hadn't recognized before. The house slowly transformed into a home. My sister's artwork covered the refrigerator. My textbooks claimed the dining table. My aunt's plants filled windowsills with life. Each addition marked our claiming of this space, making it ours through daily living rather than locks and cameras. A court date was set for my parents' bail hearing. The prosecutor wanted me to attend, though I wouldn't have to testify. Seeing them again felt impossible, but Sarah explained how my presence might impact the judge's decision. I agreed reluctantly, knowing my sister's safety depended on keeping them detained. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. Emma texted encouragement, reminding me of my strength. My aunt checked on me repeatedly, her own anxiety evident. My sister, thankfully, slept peacefully, unaware of the next day's significance. Walking into the courthouse triggered physical reactions I couldn't control. My hands shook, my breathing shortened. Dr. Martinez had prepared me for this response, teaching grounding techniques. I focused on my aunt's steady presence beside me, Sarah's professional guidance, and the knowledge that I was no longer alone. My parents entered in orange jumpsuits and shackles. They looked smaller than I remembered, their power diminished by consequences they couldn't manipulate. Mom tried to make eye contact, but I focused on the judge instead. Their attorney argued for their release, case, citing their previously clean records and community ties. The prosecutor presented evidence of their ongoing manipulation attempts from jail. Phone recordings revealed continued delusions about my mental state, plans to regain custody through any means necessary. The judge listened carefully, occasionally glancing at me in the gallery. When the judge denied bail again, Mom's composure cracked. She turned toward me, mouth opening as if to speak, but the bailiffs were already moving, escorting them back to detention. Dad never looked my way, his jaw set in familiar, stubborn lines. They exited still believing themselves victims of misunderstanding rather than perpetrators of abuse. Outside the courthouse, I breathed deeply for the first time in hours. My aunt hugged me tightly, Sarah congratulated my courage, and even Detective Chen expressed admiration for my composure. But all I felt was exhaustion and relief that this particular ordeal had ended. The drive home was quiet. My sister waited with her therapist, who'd agreed to watch her during the hearing. She ran to greet us, eager to share the painting she'd created. The normalcy of her excitement after the intensity of court felt jarring but necessary. That evening, we established a new tradition, family meetings where everyone could share concerns or celebrations without judgment. My sister went first, proudly announcing she'd made a friend at school. My aunt shared her relief about the bail decision. I admitted feeling scared but hopeful. Open communication felt revolutionary after years of surveillance disguised as care. School started in 2 weeks. The prospect terrified and excited me equally. Emma helped me shop for supplies, treating it like any other back-to-school preparation. But selecting notebooks felt momentous when I'd been denied even basic autonomy for so long. Each choice represented freedom my parents had tried to steal. My sister's behavior improved gradually. Her therapist reported breakthrough sessions where she'd begun processing anger at our parents rather than acting it out at school. Her teacher sent home positive notes about improved focus and cooperation. Small victories accumulated into real progress. I started driving lessons with my aunt. My parents had never allowed me to learn, claiming the roads were too dangerous. But independence required mobility. Each successful parallel parking attempt felt like rebellion against their control. My sister cheered from the back seat during practice sessions. The prosecutor met with us about the upcoming trial. My testimony would be crucial, though the physical evidence was strong. They explained the process, the questions I'd face, the likelihood of conviction. Justice felt both necessary and insufficient for healing, but I committed to seeing it through. Emma and I studied together most evenings. Her presence normalized teenage life in ways I desperately needed. We complained about calculus, debated college choices, and gossiped about classmates. These ordinary moments mattered more than any dramatic resolution could. My first day of school arrived with unexpected calm. My aunt drove me, my sister singing from the back seat. Walking through those doors felt like crossing a threshold back into life. Emma met me at my locker, introducing me to friends who knew nothing of my story. I was just another senior catching up on credits. Classes challenged me after months without formal education, but teachers proved understanding when my aunt explained the circumstances. They developed modified schedules and extra support without making me feel singled out. Education became another form of healing, proving my mind remained my own despite my parents' attempts to claim otherwise. My sister thrived in her new environment. She joined the art club, made friends, and slowly stopped checking doors to ensure they weren't locked. Her recovery inspired my own, showing resilience could be learned and shared. We were surviving together, building a future our parents had tried to steal. The trial date approached inevitably. Sarah prepared me through mock questioning, building confidence for the actual testimony. The truth would be enough, she assured me. No dramatics needed, just honest recounting of imprisonment and abuse. My parents' own actions had created all the evidence necessary for conviction. 2 days before trial, Linda accepted a plea deal. She'd testify against my parents in exchange for reduced charges. The betrayal between conspirators felt like poetic justice. Their scheme had collapsed from within, greed turning them against each other when consequences arrived. My parents' attorney requested a meeting. They wanted to negotiate a plea deal, avoiding trial in exchange for admitting guilt. The prosecutor left the decision partly to me. Did I need the closure of testimony, or would their admission suffice? I thought of my sister, of other potential victims, and chose to accept their guilty plea. They received 15 years each for false imprisonment, fraud, and child endangerment. Linda got 8 years for her role. The sentences felt both too long and not long enough, but they ensured my sister would reach adulthood before our parents could seek contact again. Safety mattered more than revenge. After sentencing, we returned to our new normal. Homework, therapy appointments, family dinners without fear. My sister painted a mural on her bedroom wall, filling it with butterflies and flowers. I helped her add details, our collaboration healing in ways words couldn't capture. College acceptance letters started arriving. Each one represented possibilities my parents had tried to eliminate. Emma and I compared options, dreaming of futures that extended beyond survival. My aunt cried when I got into my first choice school, pride mixing with relief that I'd reclaimed my potential. Spring brought graduation preparations. Cap and gown fittings felt surreal after everything. My sister insisted on helping me decorate my cap, covering it with stars and the word freedom in glittering letters. Her artistic expression captured what academic achievements couldn't fully convey. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. My aunt and sister cheered as I walked across the stage. Emma hugged me afterward, both of us heading toward different colleges but bonded forever by her family's intervention. Officer Rodriguez attended, his proud smile reminding me that good people existed in systems that sometimes failed. That summer passed peacefully. I worked at the library, saved money, prepared for college. My sister attended art camp, making friends who knew nothing of our past. We visited Emma's family regularly, maintaining connections that had saved us. Life developed rhythm without the percussion of locks and surveillance. Before leaving for college, I wrote letters to my parents, not for sending, but for closure. I acknowledged their grief over my brother while refusing to excuse their abuse. I forgave them for my own peace while maintaining boundaries that protected my future. The letters went into a box with other remnants of that time, stored but not displayed. My aunt drove me to college, my sister navigating from the back seat. Watching campus appear through the windshield felt like approaching a new world. Students moved freely between buildings, choosing their paths without surveillance or restriction. I would join them, my hard-won autonomy finally serving its intended purpose. My sister helped carry boxes to my dorm room. She'd grown taller during during our months of freedom, her confidence expanding with her height. We hung photos of our new family configuration, evidence of survival and adaptation. When they left, I stood in my single room, door unlocked, future finally my own to shape. That night, I called Emma from my dorm phone. We compared first day experiences, maintaining connection across distance. My roommate seemed nice, unaware of my history and treating me like any other freshman. The anonymity felt like a gift, allowing me to define myself beyond trauma. Classes started with expected nervousness but unexpected joy. Choosing my schedule, walking freely between buildings, eating unmonitored meals in the dining hall. Each ordinary experience felt extraordinary after imprisonment. Education became celebration of the mind my parents had tried to control. My sister called weekly with updates about school and art projects. Her voice grew stronger with each conversation, childhood returning gradually. My aunt sent care packages and encouragement, our makeshift family maintaining bonds across distance. Love existed without locks, care without control. Thanksgiving brought our first holiday in the new house. My aunt cooked while my sister and I decorated. Emma joined us, her presence bridging past and present. We created new traditions consciously, choosing what to carry forward and what to leave behind. The meal tasted like freedom, seasoned with safety and served with genuine gratitude. I declared my major in social work spring semester. The choice felt inevitable after everything. Understanding systems that failed children, working to prevent others from experiencing similar abuse. My professors encouraged my passion while respecting my privacy about its origins. Years later, my sister started high school with confidence I'd never had at her age. She painted sets for theater productions and dated with appropriate teenage drama rather than parental paranoia. Her normalcy was hard-won, protected by legal boundaries and nurtured by love that didn't imprison. My parents served their sentences quietly. No letters came, no contact attempted. They existed in a past that shaped but no longer defined us. Linda's daughter received justice through her mother's conviction, her story part of court records that might protect future victims. I graduated with honors, my aunt and sister cheering from the audience. The diploma represented more than academic achievement. It proved that imprisonment couldn't steal potential, that manipulation couldn't break spirit, that survival could transform into success through support and determination. My sister got accepted to art school. Watching her prepare for college felt like completing a circle. She packed with excitement rather than escape plans, chose classes for interest rather than survival. Her freedom had been protected rather than stolen, her potential nurtured rather than imprisoned. I took a job at a youth shelter, helping teenagers who'd escaped various forms of abuse. My supervisor didn't know my history initially, hiring me for my qualifications and passion. When I eventually shared my story, she understood why I worked late, ensuring no child spent a night feeling trapped. My aunt found love with a patient man who understood our family's complexity. Watching her build a relationship based on trust rather than control showed healing extended beyond those directly harmed. My sister and I gained a stepfather who respected boundaries while offering steady support. The basement window haunted dreams occasionally, that tiny opening representing both imprisonment and escape. But morning always came with unlocked doors and chosen destinations. Trauma had shaped but not broken us. We'd built lives worth living from pieces our parents had tried to shatter. My sister's college graduation felt like final victory. She'd become an artist and teacher, using creativity to help children express themselves safely. Our parents had been released by then, but they existed in a world we no longer inhabited. Their power had ended the night I crawled through that window, though it took years to fully understand our freedom. I married someone who understood that love meant respect, not control. My sister was my maid of honor, painting a portrait as her wedding gift. My aunt walked me down the aisle, our chosen family celebrating connection built on trust rather than surveillance. Children came eventually, raised with appropriate supervision rather than paranoid control. They knew their other grandparents existed, but not the details. Protection meant creating boundaries, not prisons. They grew up climbing trees and skinning knees, taking risks within reason while learning to trust their own judgment. My work expanded to policy advocacy, pushing for better oversight of homeschooling and family welfare checks. Each small change might prevent another basement imprisonment, another child disappeared into false mental illness. Linda's daughter's story became cautionary tale in training materials, her loss potentially saving others. The old house sold eventually, new families creating different memories within those walls. The basement became a playroom, its window enlarged for safety codes. I drove past once, seeing children's toys where my makeshift bed had been. The transformation felt like exorcism, old ghosts replaced by innocent laughter. My sister became an art therapist, combining talents to help traumatized children. We spoke at conferences together sometimes, sharing our story professionally. Survival had become expertise. Trauma transformed into tools for helping others escape their own basements, literal or metaphorical. Our parents aged in separate towns, their schemes failure complete. No insurance money, no controlled children, no legacy except cautionary legal precedent. They'd lost everything trying to imprison us, while we'd gained lives they couldn't have imagined. Justice came not through their suffering, but through our thriving. My children grew up knowing their aunt as the artist who painted their bedrooms with wonder. They didn't know she'd once been told she was contagious, kept from her sister through lies. They saw only the confident woman who taught them that creativity could overcome any obstacle. I kept one photo from before, showing our complete family at my brother's last birthday. His death had catalyzed our parents' descent, but it hadn't excused it. I told my children about their uncle who died too young, teaching them appropriate caution without paranoid control. His memory deserved better than becoming a weapon. The tiny basement window appeared in my sister's paintings sometimes, transformed into metaphor for perspective and possibility. She'd never seen it from inside, but she understood its significance. That impossible opening had saved both our lives, her art capturing what my words couldn't fully express. Retirement brought time for the book I'd always considered writing, not for fame or profit, but for the teenagers who might recognize their own imprisonment in my story. The dedication read simply, "For Linda's daughter and all the others who couldn't escape." My sister illustrated it with butterflies breaking free from glass jars. We scattered my aunt's ashes in her garden when cancer took her too soon. She'd given us home when ours had become prison, love when trust seemed impossible. My sister and I held each other among the flowers she'd planted, grateful for the years she'd given us to grow beyond our parents' twisted soil. Our parents died within months of each other, their codependency extending to the end. We attended neither funeral, sending flowers without messages. They'd chosen control over love, manipulation over truth. Their graves marked the end of their influence, not the beginning of our grief. My grandchildren played freely in my backyard, their laughter unmarked by surveillance or suspicion. They climbed trees I'd been forbidden to approach, stayed out past dark catching fireflies I'd never been allowed to see. Their freedom felt like generational healing, chains broken so thoroughly they'd never know their weight. My sister's retrospective art show included the Basement series, abstract paintings processing trauma through color and form. Critics praised her technical skill, but survivors recognized the emotional truth. She donated proceeds to organizations preventing child abuse, our story generating resources for others' escape. I retired from direct service, my body too old for crisis intervention, but I mentored young social workers, teaching them to recognize signs others might miss. The tiny details that suggested imprisonment, the child who couldn't explain their homeschooling, the parent who spoke of danger with calculating eyes rather than genuine fear. We grew old differently than our parents had, surrounded by chosen family rather than controlled children. My sister's house overflowed with art and visiting grandchildren. Mine hosted holiday gatherings where doors stayed open and love meant freedom to come and go. The basement window entered family legend, that impossible escape route becoming symbol of resilience. New generations heard age-appropriate versions, learning that sometimes the smallest opening could lead to freedom if you were brave enough to squeeze through. They'd never need such desperate measures, but they'd know survival was possible. My final painting from my sister showed two girls standing in sunlight, no walls or windows visible. We'd moved beyond the basement entirely, its power to define us finally exhausted. The trauma remained part of our story, but no longer its primary theme. We'd written ourselves a different ending, one our parents never imagined possible. Freedom tasted like my granddaughter's birthday cake, sounded like my sister's laugh at family gatherings, felt like choosing to unlock my door each morning. We'd built lives worth living from the ruins of our parents' control. The basement had held my body for months, but it had never truly contained my spirit. My sister and I sat on her porch, watching our families play together in the yard. Gray-haired now, we'd survived longer free than we'd lived controlled. Our parents' legacy was the strength they'd forced us to develop, the bonds they'd inadvertently created by trying to break us. We'd won simply by living, by choosing love over fear, connection over control. The investigation that had started with my escape had rippled outward, protecting children we'd never meet. Linda's daughter received justice she couldn't claim herself. Other families recognized warning signs and intervened before basements became prisons. Our survival had meaning beyond ourselves. As twilight settled, my sister reached for my hand. No words needed after decades of shared understanding. We'd crawled through impossibly small windows, testified to unbearable truths, rebuilt lives from fractured foundations. But we'd done it together, sisters bound by more than blood. Our children called us inside for dinner, voices full of casual affection. We rose slowly, age-marking bodies that had survived more than they should have. But we rose freely, entering homes where love meant safety, where doors locked only to protect, never to imprison. The basement existed now only in occasional dreams and old police files. Its power had faded with each year of freedom, each choice made without surveillance, each relationship built on trust. We'd transformed imprisonment into purpose, trauma into triumph, survival into lives worth celebrating. My story ended not with escape, but with everything that came after. The crawl through that window had been beginning, not conclusion. Real victory was in the decades of freedom that followed, the lives we'd built, the children we'd raised without fear. My parents had tried to write our ending, but we'd claimed the pen and authored our own futures. The basement window had been impossibly small, but possibility itself was larger than any prison, stronger than any lock, more enduring than any parent's twisted love. We'd squeezed through that tiny opening and discovered the world was vast enough to hold our healing. That was the only ending that mattered. Seeing them build a whole new life, becoming a social worker to help other kids, raising their own children with actual love instead of surveillance. It's beautiful how they turned their trauma into purpose. And the sister becoming an art therapist, both of them using their experience to protect other children, while their parents died alone having lost everything. That's the kind of ending that gives me hope. The basement window that seemed impossibly small ended up being the opening to save multiple lives. But that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing.